The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Lincoln High School as Maya Chen stepped out of her father's weathered sedan. She could feel the weight of countless eyes tracking her movement, hear the whispers that rippled through clusters of students like wind through dry leaves. Her reputation had preceded her. The violent girl from Riverside Academy, the one who'd hospitalized 3 seniors in a single fight. Maya kept her chin raised, her dark eyes focused on the main entrance, refusing to acknowledge the stares and murmurs that followed her like accusatory ghosts. "Psychopath," someone whispered loud enough for her to hear. "I heard she broke a guy's jaw with one punch," another voice added. "My cousin goes to Riverside, said she went completely feral, took 3 security guards to pull her off." The stories had grown in the telling, as stories always do. But Maya didn't bother correcting them, let them think what they wanted. Fear was better than pity, and both were better than the truth, that she'd been defending herself against a coordinated attack by students who'd cornered her after school, students who'd thought a girl alone would be easy prey. The administrative wing of Lincoln High smelled of industrial disinfectant and old coffee, the fluorescent lights casting everything in harsh, unforgiving brightness. Maya sat rigidly in an uncomfortable plastic chair while her father, David Chen, fidgeted beside her, his calloused hands that had taught thousands of students the art of self-defense, now nervously drumming against his thigh. Across from them, Mrs. Harrison, a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair pulled into a severe bun, reviewed Maya's transfer documents with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many troubled students pass through her office. "Your academic records from Riverside Academy are impressive," Mrs. Harrison began, her voice carefully neutral. "Honor roll for 3 consecutive semesters, advanced placement courses, exceptional scores in mathematics and sciences." She paused, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. "Which makes your behavioral record all the more troubling. 3 separate incidents of violence in 1 academic year, culminating in your expulsion for what's described here as excessive force, resulting in serious bodily harm to multiple students." Maya felt her jaw clench involuntarily. Excessive force. As if she'd had a choice when they'd surrounded her, when the largest one had grabbed her hair and tried to slam her face into a brick wall. As if she should have held back, measured her response, while fighting off 3 attackers who each outweighed her by 50 pounds. But she said nothing, had learned that explanations sounded like excuses, and excuses changed nothing. "Miss Chen," Mrs. Harrison continued, setting down the papers and fixing Maya with a penetrating stare, "Lincoln High is willing to give you this opportunity because we believe in second chances. However, I need to be absolutely clear about our expectations. We have a zero-tolerance policy regarding violence. No fights, no altercations, no exceptions. If you so much as raise a hand against another student, regardless of the circumstances, you will be immediately expelled. And given your history, I doubt any traditional school in the state would accept you after that. Do you understand?" "She understands," David interjected quickly, his hand finding Maya's shoulder and squeezing perhaps a bit too tightly. "We've discussed this extensively. Maya knows this is her last chance at a normal education." He turned to his daughter, his eyes pleading. "Don't you, Maya?" Maya met her father's gaze and saw the exhaustion there, the weight of single parenthood, of trying to raise a daughter whose grief had crystallized into rage after her mother's death 4 years ago. She nodded, not trusting her voice, knowing that any words might betray the anger that still simmered just beneath her carefully controlled surface. Mrs. Harrison studied them both for a long moment, then opened a drawer and pulled out a class schedule. "Your first class begins in 20 minutes. I've assigned you to Mr. Peterson's homeroom. He's been briefed on your situation and will be monitoring your integration closely." She slid the paper across the desk. I sincerely hope, Miss Chen, that we don't see each other in this office again under disciplinary circumstances." As they left the administrative wing and entered the main hallway, David pulled Maya aside near a display case filled with dusty trophies and faded photographs of former sports teams. The corridor was momentarily empty, the morning rush having subsided as students settled into their first period classes. David's face, usually so controlled and confident when teaching in his dojo, now showed every line of worry and strain from the past year of Maya's escalating behavioral issues. "Maya, please," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something fragile between them. "I know you're angry. I know you're hurting. I miss her too, every single day. But this violence, this rage, it's not what she would have wanted for you. Your mother believed in the spiritual aspects of martial arts, in discipline and control, not in using it to hurt others." "They attacked me first," Maya said quietly, the first words she'd spoken since entering the building. "All 3 times at Riverside, I was defending myself." "I know," David replied, surprising her. "I believe you. But sometimes, Maya, the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the bravest thing is to refuse to fight, even when you know you could win." He checked his watch, a habit when he was anxious. "I need to use the restroom before we get your textbooks. Wait here, and please try to stay out of trouble, even for just one day." As her father's footsteps faded down the hallway, Maya leaned against the trophy case, her own reflection staring back at her from the glass, dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, angular features that had once been called pretty before permanent frown lines had set in, eyes that held too much anger for someone who had just turned 17. She pulled out her phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media, trying to ignore the handful of messages from former classmates at Riverside, most variations of "good riddance" or worse. A sudden commotion from the adjacent hallway broke through her digital distraction. The sound was familiar, the distinctive mixture of cruel laughter, pleading voices, and the dull thud of a body hitting metal lockers. Every instinct in Maya's body tensed, recognizing the soundtrack of bullying, a melody she knew all too well. She should ignore it, she knew, should stay exactly where her father had told her to wait, should mind her own business on this, her very first day at a new school where she was already on the thinnest possible ice. But her feet moved of their own accord, carrying her toward the sound. She peered around the corner to see 3 students surrounding a smaller boy whose thick glasses had been knocked askew, his armload of advanced mathematics and engineering textbooks scattered across the scuffed linoleum floor. The boy, Asian, probably Korean or Chinese, couldn't have weighed more than 130 pounds soaking wet, was pressed against the lockers while the 3 aggressors loomed over him. The largest of the 3, a muscular teenager with close-cropped hair and the build of a wrestler, had his hand pressed against the smaller boy's chest, pinning him in place. "You were supposed to help us pass that physics exam, Marcus," he growled, his voice carrying the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "We had a deal. You write the answers on the cheat sheet. We leave you alone for the rest of the semester." "I couldn't," Marcus stammered, trying unsuccessfully to straighten his glasses with his free hand. "Mr. Rodriguez rearranged the seating chart at the last minute. I wasn't anywhere near your desks, and even if I had been, it wouldn't have been right. Other students studied for weeks for that test." "Wrong answer," the second aggressor said. A lanky teenager with bleached tips in his dark hair, who Maya would later learn was named Jake. His fist connected with Marcus's stomach, not hard enough to cause serious damage, but sufficient to drive the air from his lungs and double him over in pain. "We don't care about what's right. We care about not failing physics and getting kicked off the wrestling team." The third tormentor, shorter but stockier than his companions, kicked Marcus's backpack, sending its contents spilling across the hallway. Expensive graphing calculators, color-coded notebooks, and several thick textbooks that looked like they belonged in a college engineering course rather than a high school. "Look at all this nerd stuff," he laughed. "Bet you've never even talked to a girl, have you, Marcus? Too busy with your precious equations and formulas." "Please," Marcus gasped, still struggling to catch his breath. "Those books, they're my father's. He's letting me borrow them for my independent study project. Some of them are out of print, irreplaceable. Should have thought about that before you decided to grow a conscience." The largest one, who Maya would later learn was named Brad Williams, raised his fist for another blow. Maya watched from around the corner, her father's words echoing in her mind like a mantra. "Walk away. Don't engage. The strongest thing is not to fight." She started to turn away, to return to the trophy case and pretend she'd seen nothing when Brad's fist connected with Marcus's face, sending his glasses flying and opening a small cut above his eyebrow. The sight of blood, the whimper of pain from someone so obviously defenseless, ignited something in Maya that overrode her father's wisdom and her own self-preservation instincts. She pulled out her phone and began recording, making sure to capture all three faces clearly in the frame. The movement caught Jake's attention, and he whirled around, his eyes narrowing as he spotted her. "Hey!" he shouted, alerting his companions. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Maya kept filming, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. "Documenting three cowards who need to gang up on one person half their size. I'm sure the administration would find this very interesting." Brad released Marcus, who slumped against the lockers, and turned his full attention to Maya. Up close, she could see he was even larger than she'd initially thought. Probably 6'2", over 200 pounds of muscle built through years of wrestling and weight training. "Give me that phone," he demanded, taking a step toward her. "Not happening," Maya replied, taking a defensive stance that was so automatic she didn't even realize she'd done it. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, hands raised slightly, but not enough to appear aggressive. "New girl thinks she's tough," Jake sneered, moving to flank her from the left, while the shorter one circled to her right. "Let's show her how we welcome transfer students to Lincoln High." Brad lunged first, reaching for the phone with his right hand, while attempting to grab her wrist with his left, a classic wrestling move designed to control and subdue. But Maya had been training in martial arts since she was 6 years old, had spent countless hours practicing against opponents who were bigger and stronger. She pivoted on her back foot, using Brad's momentum against him, and swept his leg as he passed. The wrestling champion, so confident in his strength, found himself crashing face first into the linoleum with a sound that echoed through the hallway. Jake came at her next with a wild haymaker punch, all power and no technique, the kind of attack thrown by someone who'd only ever fought opponents who were already afraid of him. Maya ducked under the swing, her body moving with a fluidity born from thousands of hours of practice, and delivered a precise palm strike to his solar plexus. The air rushed from Jake's lungs as he staggered backward, clutching his chest, unable to breathe properly. The third attacker, whose name she would later learn was Tom, hesitated for a crucial second, his eyes darting between his two downed friends. That hesitation was all Maya needed. As he finally committed to his attack, rushing at her with his shoulder lowered like a football tackle, she sidestepped and used his momentum for a textbook hip throw that her father had made her practice until she could do it in her sleep. Tom hit the floor hard, the impact driving all the air from his lungs and leaving him gasping like a landed fish. The entire confrontation had lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Maya stood in the center of the hallway, her breathing slightly elevated but otherwise showing no signs of exertion, while three larger opponents lay groaning on the floor around her. Marcus stared at her with a mixture of shock, fear, and something that looked like awe, blood still trickling from the cut above his eye. "You should probably get your things and go to the nurse," Maya said quietly, pocketing her phone. And you three, she addressed the slowly recovering bullies, should remember that cameras are everywhere these days. Touch him again, and this video goes viral. She turned and walked back toward the trophy case, her hands beginning to shake slightly as the adrenaline started to fade. Behind her, she could hear Marcus scrambling to collect his scattered belongings, and the three bullies slowly getting to their feet, muttering threats and curses, but making no move to follow her. David was waiting by the trophy case, having returned from the restroom to find his daughter missing. His face went through a rapid series of expressions as he saw her approaching. Relief, concern, and then suspicion as he noticed the slight flush in her cheeks and the way her hands were clenched into fists. "Everything okay?" he asked carefully. "Fine," Maya replied, not meeting his eyes. "Just went to find a water fountain." David didn't look convinced, but before he could probe further, the bell rang, signaling the end of first period. The hallways suddenly flooded with students, and any chance for further discussion was lost in the chaos of teenage bodies rushing to their next classes. The next morning arrived grey and drizzling, matching Maya's mood as she stood at the front of Mr. Peterson's homeroom class, feeling like a specimen under a microscope as 25 pairs of eyes examined her with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases, barely concealed hostility. Mr. Peterson, a tired-looking man in his 50s, who had clearly seen too many troubled students pass through his classroom, gave her a perfunctory introduction. "Class, this is Maya Chen. She's transferring here from Riverside Academy. Please make her feel welcome and help her get adjusted to Lincoln High's procedures." His tone suggested he expected neither welcoming nor help to actually occur. Maya scanned the classroom, her heart sinking as she spotted Brad, Jake, and Tom seated in the back row, their eyes burning with a mixture of humiliation and promised revenge. But surprisingly, Marcus was also there, seated in the front row, as far from his tormentors as possible, a small bandage covering the cut above his eye. When their eyes met, he offered a tentative smile and a small nod of gratitude. "Take the empty seat next to Marcus," Mr. Peterson directed, already turning his attention back to his attendance sheet. As Maya slid into the desk, she could feel the hostile stares from the back of the room boring into her skull. Marcus leaned over slightly, keeping his voice to barely a whisper. "Thank you for yesterday. I'm Marcus Lin, by the way. I never got a chance to properly introduce myself." "I didn't do it for you," Maya replied coolly, pulling out her notebooks and trying to project an aura of disinterest. "I just hate bullies." Marcus nodded, seeming unsurprised by her response. "Still, no one's ever stood up for me like that before. It was incredible. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Before Maya could respond, Mr. Peterson cleared his throat loudly, shooting them both a warning look. The rest of the class period passed in relative silence, but Maya remained acutely aware of the tension in the room. The way Brad kept cracking his knuckles, the way Jake whispered to Tom while pointing at her, the way even students who hadn't been involved in yesterday's incident seemed to give her a wider berth than necessary. When the final bell rang at the end of the school day, Maya gathered her things quickly, hoping to make it to the bus stop without incident. She'd managed to avoid Brad and his crew for most of the day by eating lunch in the library and taking longer routes between classes, but she knew her luck wouldn't hold forever. She was halfway across the parking lot when she heard footsteps jogging up behind her. "Maya, wait up, please." She turned to find Marcus hurrying after her, his backpack bouncing awkwardly as he ran, his repaired glasses slightly crooked on his face. Maya sighed and stopped walking, though every instinct told her to keep moving, to avoid forming any connections that might complicate her already precarious situation. "What do you want, Marcus?" she asked, not unkindly, but with clear boundaries in her tone. Marcus caught up, slightly out of breath. Clearly, physical fitness wasn't his strong suit. I wanted to thank you properly for yesterday, and to warn you. Brad Williams, the big guy you threw, he's not going to let this go. His older brother is part of some gang downtown, and Brad's been bragging that he's going to join too. He's dangerous, and now you're on his radar. I can take care of myself, Maya replied, starting to walk again. Marcus fell into step beside her, having to take quick steps to keep up with her longer stride. I'm sure you can, but that's not the point. You helped me when you didn't have to, when it would have been easier and safer to walk away. That means something to me. Maya stopped again, turning to really look at Marcus for the first time. Beyond the thick glasses and the nervous energy, she saw someone who reminded her a bit of herself. Isolated, defensive, trying to survive in a system that seemed designed to crush anyone who didn't fit the standard mold. Look, Marcus, I appreciate the warning, but we're not friends. I don't do friends. It's nothing personal, but I've got enough problems without adding social complications to the mix. Marcus nodded, but didn't seem discouraged. I understand, but can I ask you something? Where did you learn to fight like that? It wasn't just self-defense. It was art. The way you moved, the way you used their own strength against them. I've watched plenty of martial arts videos online, but I've never seen anything quite like it in real life. Despite herself, Maya felt a small spark of pride. My father runs a martial arts dojo, Phoenix Martial Arts, over on 8th Street. I've been training since I was 6. Started with traditional karate, then added judo, some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and a bit of Muay Thai. Marcus's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's amazing. Do you think... would it be possible? Could you teach me? Just some basic self-defense. I can pay for lessons. Maya almost laughed. You learn martial arts? No offense, Marcus, but you don't exactly seem like the fighter type. That's exactly why I need to learn, Marcus insisted, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. Do you know what it's like to be powerless? To know that any random person could hurt you and there's nothing you could do about it? My father owns a small restaurant in Chinatown. Last week, 3 drunk college kids came in, ate a huge meal, and then refused to pay. When I tried to stand up to them, one of them shoved me so hard I flew back into a table. My dad had to comp their meal just to get them to leave without destroying the place. Maya saw the shame in his eyes, the frustration of someone who'd been pushed around his entire life. It was a feeling she knew intimately, though her response had been to learn to push back harder than anyone who tried to push her. Even if I wanted to teach you, which I don't, I'm already on thin ice here. The last thing I need is to get in trouble for teaching someone to fight. But it wouldn't be about fighting, Marcus argued. It would be about self-defense, about confidence, about not being afraid all the time. Please, Maya. I'm not asking you to turn me into some kind of warrior. I just want to be able to protect myself and my family. Maya studied him for a long moment, seeing echoes of her younger self, before the training, before the anger, back when she was just a scared kid who'd lost her mother and didn't know how to process the grief. She thought about her father's dojo, mostly empty these days, as students had gradually drifted away, scared off by stories of his daughter's violent reputation. Fine, she heard herself saying, surprising them both. But we do this at my father's dojo, under his supervision, and you follow the rules, all of them. Martial arts isn't about violence, it's about discipline and control. If you can't handle that, we're done. Marcus's face broke into a genuine smile, the first one she'd seen from him. Thank you. When can we start? Tomorrow after school. Phoenix Martial Arts, 8th Street. Don't be late. Maya turned and walked away before she could second-guess her decision, leaving Marcus standing in the parking lot with a mixture of excitement and trepidation on his face. The next day at school, Maya was organizing her locker between classes when she sensed someone approaching from behind. Her body tensed automatically, ready for confrontation, but the voice that spoke was female and oddly hesitant. "You're the new girl, Maya Chen." Maya turned to find a girl her own age with carefully styled blonde hair and designer clothes that screamed money and privilege. She recognized her from some of her classes. Sarah something, clearly one of the popular crowd based on how other students seemed to orbit around her in the hallways. "That's me," Maya replied neutrally, unsure where this was going. Sarah glanced around nervously, as if checking to make sure they weren't being observed. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'm on the student council, and I wanted to talk to you about what happened with Brad and his friends." Maya's expression hardened. "If you're here to threaten me or warn me off, save your breath. They attacked someone 3-on-1. I just evened the odds." "No, that's not—" Sarah paused, seeming to wrestle with something internally. "Look, I know Brad and those guys are jerks. They've been getting away with stuff like that for years because Brad's brother has connections and everyone's afraid of them. But what you did, standing up to them like that, it was brave. Stupid, maybe, but brave." "Is there a point to this conversation?" Maya asked, not in the mood for whatever game this girl was playing. Sarah's expression shifted, hardening into something more familiar, the look of a queen bee whose territory had been challenged. "The point is that Brad's not going to let this go. He's planning something, and when he comes for you, you're going to need allies. I might be willing to help, but you'd owe me." "I don't make deals with people I don't know," Maya replied, "and I don't need anyone's protection." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everyone needs protection at Lincoln High. You just don't know it yet." She turned to leave, then paused. "Brad's not the only one you should worry about. His cousin, Daniel Morrison, is student council president. He's smarter than Brad, more subtle and much more dangerous. Watch yourself." Before Maya could respond, Sarah had disappeared into the crowded hallway, leaving Maya with more questions than answers, and a growing sense that she'd stepped into something much more complicated than a simple case of bullying. That afternoon, Maya arrived at Phoenix Martial Arts to find her father in the main training area, running through a complex kata with the fluid grace of someone who'd been practicing for decades. The dojo was modest but well-maintained, clean mats covering the floor, mirrors along one wall, traditional weapons displayed on another, and a small shrine to her mother in the corner with her picture, fresh flowers, and a stick of incense that David replaced every morning. "You're early," David observed, not breaking his form. "Marcus, a kid from school, is coming by. He wants to learn self-defense." Maya tried to keep her tone casual, but her father knew her too well. David completed his kata and turned to face her, using a small towel to wipe the perspiration from his face. "The same kid you defended yesterday." Maya's eyes widened slightly. "How did you—" "Mrs. Harrison called. Said there was an incident involving 3 boys in the hallway, but that no one would talk about what happened. The 3 boys claimed they fell, and the smaller boy, Marcus Lynn, insisted nothing had happened. But she mentioned security footage showed you in the area around the time of the incident." Maya felt her stomach drop. "Are they going to—" "No," David interrupted, "without anyone making a complaint. And with the supposed victims insisting nothing happened, they're letting it go. But Maya, you're already on their watch list. You can't afford any more incidents." "They were hurting him, Dad. 3 against 1. David sighed, sitting down on one of the benches along the wall. "I know, and I'm proud of you for wanting to protect someone who couldn't protect himself. Your mother would be proud too. But there are ways to help that don't involve violence." "Like what?" "Tell a teacher, file a report. You know that doesn't work. It just makes things worse for kids like Marcus." Before David could respond, the door chimed, and Marcus entered hesitantly, looking around the dojo with obvious fascination. He'd changed out of his school clothes into sweatpants and a t-shirt that hung loosely on his thin frame. "Mr. Chen, I'm Marcus Lin. Thank you for allowing me to train here. David stood, immediately shifting into instructor mode. Welcome to Phoenix Martial Arts, Marcus. Maya tells me you're interested in learning self-defense. Yes, sir. I want to be able to protect myself and my family. David studied him for a moment, then nodded. Self-defense begins with self-discipline. The techniques I teach here can be dangerous if misused. I need to know that you'll use them responsibly. I understand, sir. I'm not looking to hurt anyone. I just don't want to be afraid anymore. David smiled slightly. Fear isn't always a bad thing, Marcus. It keeps us safe, makes us cautious. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, but to control it, to act despite it when necessary. Maya, take Marcus through the basic warm-up routine. We'll start with fundamentals. For the next hour, Maya led Marcus through basic stretches, stances, and breathing exercises. It was clear he'd never done any serious physical training. He was inflexible, uncoordinated, and winded after just the warm-up. But he didn't complain, didn't quit, just kept pushing through even when his legs shook from holding a horse stance for 30 seconds. You're going to be sore tomorrow, Maya warned as they took a water break. I'm sore now, Marcus admitted, rubbing his thighs, but it's a good kind of sore, like I'm actually doing something instead of just being passive. David approached them, having observed the entire session. You did well for your first day, Marcus. The body will adapt quickly if you're consistent. I'd like to offer you regular lessons if you're interested, 3 times a week to start. Marcus's face fell slightly. I appreciate that, Mr. Chen, but I'm not sure I can afford regular lessons. My family doesn't have a lot of extra money. David glanced at Maya, then back to Marcus. I could use some help around the dojo. Cleaning, organizing equipment, basic maintenance. If you're willing to put in a few hours of work each week, we can consider it a trade for lessons. Really? Marcus's face lit up. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. As Marcus gathered his things to leave, practically glowing with excitement despite his obvious physical exhaustion, Maya pulled her father aside. You don't need help around the dojo. You keep this place immaculate. David smiled. No, but that young man needs something we can offer. Not just the physical training, but the confidence, the discipline, the sense of belonging to something. Besides, he added with a meaningful look, I think you could use a friend. I don't need friends, Maya replied automatically. Everyone needs friends, Maya. Your mother understood that. She had a gift for bringing people together, for building community. You have that same gift. You just keep it buried under all that anger. Before Maya could respond, the door chimed again. They both turned to see a tall, athletic teenager enter, handsome in that all-American way, with sandy brown hair and the kind of confident posture that came from never having to question your place in the world. Maya recognized him vaguely from school, had seen him with the popular crowd, though he'd never been involved in any of the bullying she'd witnessed. Can I help you? David asked, moving forward. The teenager's eyes found Maya first, then shifted to David. Mr. Chen? I'm Kevin Mitchell. I was wondering if you offer boxing training here, or just traditional martial arts. We focus primarily on traditional martial arts, David replied. There's a boxing gym on the other side of town if that's what you're looking for. Actually, Kevin said, his confidence seeming to waver slightly. I've had enough of boxing. I was hoping to learn something different. Something more controlled. Maya studied him suspiciously. Sarah Mitchell. Was this her brother? Cousin? The timing seemed too coincidental. You box? David asked, his instructor's eye already assessing Kevin's build and stance. For 8 years. Competed at the state level last year. Kevin's jaw tightened. But I'm done with competitive fighting. I want to learn defense, control, discipline, things boxing never really taught me. David and Maya exchanged glances. There was clearly more to this story, but David had never been one to turn away a student seeking knowledge. "We have a trial program," David offered. "First week is free. If you're serious about learning, we can discuss regular enrollment after that." "I'm serious," Kevin assured him. "When can I start?" "Marcus here is enrolled in our beginners program, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 p.m. You're welcome to join." Kevin looked at Marcus, who was hovering near the door, then at Maya. "You train here too?" "She's been training here her whole life," David answered for her. "Maya assists with instruction sometimes." "The same Maya who took down Brad Williams and his crew?" Kevin asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. "That's all anyone at school could talk about today, even if they were too scared to say it loudly." Maya's expression hardened. "If you're here to cause trouble—" "I'm not," Kevin interrupted. "I'm here because I saw someone use minimal force to maximum effect, showing more control in a fight than I've ever managed. I want to learn that kind of discipline." There was sincerity in his voice that surprised Maya. She'd expected arrogance, maybe even subtle threats, but not this apparent genuine interest in learning. "Fine," she said, "but if you're here to spy for Brad or anyone else—" "Brad Williams is an idiot," Kevin said flatly, "and his cousin Daniel is worse. Smart enough to be dangerous, but too arrogant to see his own weaknesses. I stay away from both of them as much as possible." David cleared his throat. "Well then, Kevin, we'll see you Monday. Bring workout clothes and an open mind. The way we train here might be very different from what you're used to." After Kevin left, Maya found herself standing next to Marcus, who'd been quietly observing the entire exchange. "That was weird, right?" Marcus asked. "Kevin Mitchell wanting to train here. You know him. Everyone knows him. Star athlete, student council, dating Sarah Mitchell, though I heard they've been on and off lately. He's popular but not mean like Brad's crew. Still, seems strange that he'd want to learn martial arts when he's already a champion boxer." Maya filed this information away, her suspicious nature unable to accept the coincidence at face value. First, Sarah's cryptic warning, now her boyfriend showing up at the dojo. There were undercurrents here she didn't understand, and in her experience, what you didn't understand could hurt you. The weekend passed quietly, giving Maya time to catch up on homework and help her father with dojo maintenance. They worked in companionable silence for the most part, but occasionally David would share stories about her mother. How they'd met at a martial arts tournament. How she'd been a talented practitioner herself before choosing to focus on the spiritual and philosophical aspects of the arts. "She would have handled your situation differently," David said Sunday evening as they finished cleaning the mats. "Your mother had a way of diffusing conflict without anyone feeling defeated. She called it winning without fighting." "I'm not her," Maya replied, perhaps more sharply than intended. "No," David agreed. "But you have her strength, her sense of justice. You just express it differently." He paused, then added, "She would have liked Marcus." She always had a soft spot for underdogs. Monday arrived with unseasonable heat, making the hallways of Lincoln High feel claustrophobic and tense. Maya had managed to avoid any significant incidents, though she'd noticed Brad and his crew watching her throughout the day, whispering among themselves. The cut above Marcus's eye had healed to a faint line, and she'd seen him in the hallway between classes, always careful to take routes that avoided Brad's usual haunts. During lunch, Maya was eating alone in a corner of the cafeteria when Sarah Mitchell approached her table. Without asking permission, Sarah sat down across from her, placing her designer handbag on the table like a barrier between them. "We need to talk," Sarah said without preamble. "Do we?" Maya continued eating, not looking up. "Kevin told me he joined your father's dojo." And, Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice, and I want to know what your game is. First, you show up and immediately get into it with Brad's crew. Then you recruit Marcus Lynn, of all people. Now you've got Kevin interested in your martial arts stuff. What are you trying to do? Maya finally looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes directly. I'm trying to graduate high school without getting expelled. That's it. I didn't recruit anyone. Marcus asked for help and Kevin showed up on his own. Nothing at Lincoln High happens in isolation, Sarah said. Everything is connected. The cliques, the rivalries, the power structures. By taking down Brad publicly, you've upset the balance. Daniel Morrison isn't happy about it. The student council president? What's he got to do with Brad? Sarah glanced around, ensuring they weren't being overheard. They're cousins. Daniel is the brains. Brad is the muscle. Daniel has ambitions that go way beyond high school. Connections with some serious people downtown. He sees Brad's humiliation as a challenge to his authority. That's not my problem, Maya said. It is now, Sarah insisted. Look, I don't like you. You're rude, antisocial, and you dress like you're allergic to color. But Kevin sees something in you, and I trust his judgment mostly. So I'm going to give you some advice. Watch your back. Daniel doesn't fight with his fists. He's subtler than that. And he's got the entire student council in his pocket. Why are you telling me this? Sarah stood, picking up her handbag. Because Kevin asked me to, and because despite everything, I don't like bullies either. I just handle them differently than you do. She started to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Maya? Kevin and I aren't together anymore. Haven't been for weeks, in case you were wondering. Maya wasn't wondering, but before she could say so, Sarah had walked away, rejoining her group of friends who immediately began interrogating her about why she'd been talking to the new psycho girl. That afternoon at the dojo, Maya arrived to find Kevin already there, changed and warming up. His form was different from what they taught, more aggressive, focused on power rather than balance, but his athleticism was undeniable. You're early, Maya observed. Wanted to make a good impression, Kevin replied, continuing his stretching routine. Plus I had to get away from school. The atmosphere there is getting weird. Weird how? Kevin paused, considering his words. Daniel Morrison called a student council meeting today, mandatory attendance. Spent the whole time talking about maintaining order and tradition at Lincoln High, but everyone knew he was really talking about you. I've never even spoken to him. Doesn't matter. You embarrassed his cousin, showed that his crew isn't invincible. For someone like Daniel, that's unforgivable. Before Maya could respond, Marcus arrived, slightly out of breath and carrying a bag from his family's restaurant. Sorry I'm late. My dad insisted I bring food for everyone, said it's rude to train on an empty stomach. The aroma of Chinese food filled the dojo, and even Maya's perpetual defensiveness softened slightly. David emerged from his office, drawn by the smell. Mr. Lin's famous dumplings, Marcus said proudly, and spring rolls, and beef lo mein. He might have gone a little overboard. They ended up eating together, sitting on the mats in a casual circle. It was the first time Maya had felt anything approaching normal since her mother's death. Just people sharing a meal, no pretense, no hostility. Marcus chatted excitedly about a robotics project he was working on. Kevin shared stories from his boxing days that had David asking technical questions, and for a few minutes, Maya forgot to maintain her walls. Training that evening was intense. David started them with basic conditioning, push-ups, sit-ups, burpees that had Marcus gasping for air within minutes. Kevin fared better, his boxing training having given him excellent stamina, but even he was struggling by the end. In boxing, David explained as they caught their breath, you train to overpower your opponent. In martial arts, we train to redirect power, to use an attacker's strength against them. Kevin, attack me. Kevin hesitated. I don't want to hurt you, Mr. Chen, David smiled. I appreciate your concern. Please attack me with full force. Kevin threw a perfect boxing combination: jab, cross, hook. David moved like water, deflecting each blow with minimal effort. Then suddenly Kevin was on the mat, unsure how he'd gotten there. Power is nothing without balance, David said, helping Kevin up. Strength is nothing without control. This is what you'll learn here. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the 3 teenagers would meet at Phoenix Martial Arts. Marcus gradually improved his flexibility and stamina, though he still had the coordination of a newborn giraffe. Kevin struggled to unlearn his boxing instincts, frequently frustrated when David corrected his stance or told him to use less force. And Maya, despite her initial resistance, found herself actually enjoying teaching them basic techniques. "You're a good instructor," Kevin told her one evening, as she helped him with a particularly difficult throw. "Patient, clear. You should consider doing this professionally." "I'm not patient," Maya protested. "You've spent 20 minutes helping Marcus with the same kick without once losing your temper," Kevin pointed out. "That's pretty patient." Maya glanced over at Marcus, who was indeed still working on the basic front kick, his face screwed up in concentration. She hadn't realized she'd been helping him for that long. "He's trying," she said simply. "Most people don't even do that." It was during their 3rd week of training that everything changed. Maya was walking to her locker after last period when she heard a commotion from the student council room. The door was partially open, and she could hear raised voices inside. "You failed," someone was saying, a voice she didn't recognize. "3 of you couldn't handle 1 girl." "She knows martial arts or something," Brad's voice responded, defensive and angry. "It wasn't a fair fight." "Fair?" The first voice laughed coldly. "When has anything in life been fair? You want to run with my crew, you need to be tougher than that." Maya peered through the crack in the door to see Brad and his friends facing an older teenager, maybe 19 or 20, with gang tattoos visible on his neck and arms. This must be the brother Marcus had mentioned. "Tony, give me another chance," Brad pleaded. "I won't disappoint you again." "You already have," Tony replied. "But lucky for you, your cousin has a proposition that might make up for your failure." Another figure stepped into view. Daniel Morrison, student council president, looking every inch the clean-cut overachiever except for the calculating coldness in his eyes. "The girl is a problem," Daniel said simply. "She's disrupting the natural order of things. Students are starting to think they can stand up to us, refuse our protection. That can't be allowed." "So handle it," Tony said. "Why do you need me?" "Because she's trained. My usual methods won't work on someone who can fight. But if something were to happen to her outside of school, somewhere unfortunate..." Maya felt ice in her veins. They were planning something serious. She pulled out her phone to record, but the battery was dead. She'd forgotten to charge it the night before. "I don't do hits on high school kids," Tony said. "Bad for business." "Not a hit," Daniel clarified. "Just a lesson, something to remind her and everyone else that there are consequences for disrupting the established order." "And what do I get out of it?" "I can guarantee 20 new customers from Lincoln High within a month. Good customers, rich kids with money to spend." Tony considered this. "Make it 30 and you've got a deal. But I choose the time and place. And your cousin here participates. He needs to redeem himself." "Fine," Brad said quickly, eager to regain favor. Maya backed away from the door, her mind racing. She needed to warn someone, but who would believe her? She had no proof, and Daniel was smart enough to have this conversation where there were no cameras. She nearly ran to the dojo, arriving 15 minutes early for training. Kevin was already there, and one look at her face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked immediately. Maya hesitated, then told him everything she'd overheard. Kevin's expression grew increasingly grim as she spoke. "Tony Reeves," he said when she finished. Yeah, he's bad news. Deals drugs, runs protection rackets. If Daniel's getting involved with him... You know him? Kevin looked uncomfortable. My older brother used to box at the same gym as Tony, back before Tony went full criminal. He's dangerous, Maya, really dangerous. Marcus arrived then, immediately sensing the tension. What's going on? They filled him in, and his face paled. We should tell someone. The police, the principal, someone. Tell them what? Maya asked. That I overheard a conversation with no witnesses or proof. Daniel's smart. He'd deny everything, and then I'd have an even bigger target on my back. So what do we do? Marcus asked. We be careful, Kevin said. Stay together when possible. Avoid being alone, especially after dark, and we train harder. If they're planning something, we need to be ready. David chose that moment to enter the main training area. He took one look at their faces and frowned. What's wrong? Maya hesitated, not wanting to worry her father, but knowing he needed to be aware of potential danger. She told him an abbreviated version, that some kids at school were threatening her, nothing she couldn't handle. David's expression was grave. Maya, if you're in real danger, I can handle it, Dad. We all can. That's why we're training, right? David didn't look convinced, but before he could press further, the door chimed. They all turned, tense, but it was only Sarah Mitchell. She looked out of place in the dojo, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor near the entrance. We need to talk, she said, looking directly at Maya. All of you. Sarah? Kevin said, surprised. What are you doing here? Trying to keep you idiots from getting killed, she replied. She pulled out her phone and showed them a text conversation. Daniel's planning something for Friday night. There's going to be a party at the old warehouse on Riverside. He's making sure you'll all be there. We wouldn't go to one of Daniel's parties, Marcus said. No, but you'd go if you thought Maya was in trouble there, wouldn't you? Sarah looked at each of them in turn. He's going to have someone call in a fake emergency, say Maya's been hurt or trapped or something. When you show up to help, Tony's crew will be waiting. Why are you telling us this? Maya asked, suspicious. Sarah sighed. Because Kevin's my friend, even if we're not together anymore. And because Daniel's gotten too extreme. Student council politics is one thing, but getting involved with actual gangs... That's too far, even for Lincoln High. Can you prove any of this? Kevin asked. No more than you can prove what Maya overheard. But I'm risking a lot just being here. If Daniel finds out I warned you... We won't let that happen, Kevin assured her. Sarah laughed bitterly. You can't protect me from social destruction, Kevin. But maybe you can avoid walking into their trap. She turned to leave, then paused. There's something else. Daniel's been talking to other school leaders, trying to consolidate power. He wants to run this place like his own personal kingdom, with Tony's muscle backing him up. If he succeeds in taking you down, Maya, no one will dare oppose him. After Sarah left, they stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what they were facing. This is my fault, Maya said quietly. I should have just walked away that first day. No, Marcus said firmly, surprising everyone with his vehemence. You stood up to bullies. That's never wrong. If Daniel and Brad want to escalate things, that's on them, not you. Marcus is right, Kevin added. This was always going to happen. Daniel's been building towards something like this for months. You just gave him an excuse to accelerate his timeline. David, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. If there's real danger, we should involve the authorities. We can't, Mr. Chen, Kevin said respectfully. Not without proof. And even if we had some, Tony has connections. Some of the local cops are on his payroll. At least that's the rumor. Then we prepare, David said, his expression hardening. If they want to fight, we'll be ready, but we do this smart. No walking into traps, no being alone, and certainly no going to any warehouses on Friday night. The rest of the week passed in tense anticipation. Maya noticed more students watching her in the hallways, some with sympathy, others with a kind of morbid curiosity, as if waiting to see what would happen to someone who'd challenged the established order. Thursday afternoon, Marcus was at his locker when Brad approached him alone. Maya and Kevin were in their respective classes, and Marcus felt his heart rate spike. "Relax, nerd," Brad said, though his tone was less hostile than usual. "I'm not here to hurt you. I want to give you some advice." "I don't want your advice," Marcus managed, trying to edge away. Brad blocked his path. "Listen anyway. Tomorrow night, stay home. Whatever you hear, whoever calls, whatever emergency comes up, stay home, and tell your friends the same." Marcus studied Brad's face, seeing something unexpected there. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm not a complete monster," Brad muttered. "And because what Daniel and Tony are planning, it's too much. I wanted to put you in your place, not send you to the hospital or worse." "Or worse." Marcus's voice cracked. Brad leaned in closer. "Tony doesn't do things halfway. When he teaches lessons, people remember them, if they survive them. So stay home tomorrow night. All of you." He walked away, leaving Marcus shaken. When he told Maya and Kevin what had happened, they exchanged worried glances. "If even Brad is scared," Marcus began. "It means we definitely don't go anywhere near that warehouse," Maya finished. Friday arrived with an unseasonable cold snap, the kind that made everyone irritable and on edge. Maya kept her head down, attended her classes, and tried to ignore the feeling that everyone was watching her, waiting for something to happen. At lunch, Daniel Morrison himself approached her table. He was handsome in a politician's way, perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect clothes that probably cost more than most students' entire wardrobes. "Maya Chen," he said pleasantly, as if they were old friends. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Daniel Morrison, Student Council President." "I know who you are," Maya replied, not looking up from her food. "Of course you do. Everyone knows me." He sat down uninvited. "I wanted to personally welcome you to Lincoln High. I know your first few weeks have been eventful." "Is there a point to this?" Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The point is that Lincoln High runs on certain traditions, certain hierarchies. Students who understand and respect those hierarchies tend to have a much easier time here. And students who don't, well, they often find that high school can be a very difficult experience. Accidents happen, misunderstandings occur, rumors spread." He leaned forward slightly. "I'd hate for anything unfortunate to happen to you or your friends." Maya finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation," Daniel replied smoothly. "The world is a dangerous place, especially for people who insist on standing alone." "I'm not alone." Daniel glanced around the cafeteria pointedly. "No? I see you eating by yourself. I see you walking the halls by yourself. A couple of misfits training at your father's dojo doesn't constitute a support system, Maya. It's more than you think." Daniel stood, straightening his designer jacket. "We'll see about that. Enjoy your lunch, Maya, and do be careful on your way home tonight. The streets can be dangerous after dark." After he left, Maya found her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from anger. The condescension, the barely veiled threats, the smug certainty that he could intimidate her, it all reminded her too much of the kids at Riverside who'd thought her grief made her weak, right up until she'd shown them otherwise. That afternoon, she arrived at the dojo to find her father teaching a children's class. 6 kids, between the ages of 7 and 10, working on basic forms. She watched from the doorway as David patiently corrected their stances, offered encouragement, and made them laugh with silly analogies about fighting positions. This was what martial arts was supposed to be, she thought. Not violence, not intimidation, but discipline and confidence and community. Daniel Morrison and his crew had corrupted something pure, turned strength into oppression. When the children's class ended and the kids had been picked up by their parents, Maya, Kevin, and Marcus gathered in the dojo. David had insisted they all stay there until their parents could pick them up, not wanting any of them traveling alone. "We should patrol," Kevin suggested. "Make sure no one else from school walks into whatever trap they're setting." "No," David said firmly. "You're not vigilantes. You stay here, safe, and let them play their games with no one to play against." Around 7 p.m., Maya's phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A moment later, Marcus's phone rang, then Kevin's. "Don't answer," Maya said. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text. His face paled as he read it. "It's from an unknown number. Says you're hurt, Maya. Says you went to confront Daniel alone and they have you at the warehouse." Kevin's phone buzzed next. Similar message, claiming Marcus had been jumped and was being held at the warehouse. Maya's phone lit up with a text claiming both Kevin and Marcus had been captured. "They're trying to separate us," Kevin observed. "Make each of us think the others are in danger." For the next hour, the texts and calls continued, each more urgent than the last. Photos appeared, clearly photoshopped, showing each of them injured. Voice messages from unknown numbers claimed to be witnesses to their friends being hurt. Then, around 8:30, everything stopped. The calls, the texts, all of it just ended. They waited in tense silence for another hour before Kevin's phone rang. This time it was Sarah. "Are you guys okay?" she asked, sounding genuinely worried. "We're fine," Kevin replied, putting her on speaker. "We didn't fall for it." "Thank God. Daniel's losing it. When none of you showed up, he started ranting about respect and consequences. Tony was furious, said Daniel wasted his time and resources. They had 15 guys at that warehouse waiting for you." 15? Marcus squeaked. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "But Daniel lost face in front of Tony. That's not something he'll forgive. Be extra careful. Both of them have something to prove now." The weekend passed without incident, but the tension was palpable. Maya spent most of it at the dojo, training harder than ever. Her father watched with concern as she pushed herself through drill after drill, her intensity bordering on obsessive. "You can't fight the whole world, Maya," David said Sunday evening as she pummeled the heavy bag. "I'm not trying to fight the world," she replied between strikes. "Just the parts of it that won't leave me alone. Your mother used to say that the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. The external enemies are just reflections of our internal struggles." Maya stopped hitting the bag, breathing heavily. "I'm not Mom. I can't just meditate my problems away or find the peaceful solution. Some people only understand force. Perhaps. But force without wisdom is just violence. And violence breeds more violence. Where does it end, Maya?" She didn't have an answer for that. Monday morning arrived with news that spread through Lincoln High like wildfire. Tony Reeves had been arrested over the weekend in a major drug bust. Apparently, someone had tipped off the state police, not the locals, about a major deal going down. Daniel was absent from school, and rumors flew about his involvement. Some said he'd been questioned by police. Others claimed his parents had sent him away to avoid scandal. Brad and his crew kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Did you have something to do with this?" Marcus asked Maya at lunch. "How could I? I was at the dojo all weekend, remember?" But Kevin was looking at her strangely. "Your dad used to be military, right? Before he opened the dojo." "Special Forces," Maya confirmed. "But he's been out for 15 years. Still, bet he maintained some contacts. The kind of people who might be interested in a drug dealer trying to recruit high school students." Maya shrugged. "I wouldn't know about that." But she remembered the long phone call her father had made Saturday morning, speaking in low tones in his office. She'd heard him mention Tony's name once, and something about protecting kids and crossing lines. With Tony arrested and Daniel mysteriously absent, the atmosphere at Lincoln High shifted dramatically. Students who'd been afraid to speak up about bullying suddenly found their voices. Brad and his remaining crew, without their leader and protection, became pariahs almost overnight. Wednesday afternoon, Brad approached Maya at her locker. He was alone, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely vulnerable. "I wanted to apologize," he said without preamble. Maya raised an eyebrow. "For which part? The bullying, the threats, the attempted ambush?" "All of it." Brad ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know apologizing doesn't fix anything, but my brother's going to prison for a long time, and Daniel's parents shipped him off to military school. Says it's for his own good, but really they just want him away from the scandal. And you're telling me this why?" "Because I'm done. Done with the bullying, done with the intimidation, done trying to be something I'm not." He looked at her directly. "You were right to stand up to us. We were assholes, are assholes. But I want to change." Maya studied him, looking for deception, but found only exhaustion and what might have been genuine remorse. "People don't just change overnight, Brad." "No, they don't. But they have to start somewhere, right?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I was wondering, could I join your training at the dojo?" Maya almost laughed. "You want to train with us after everything?" "I want to learn discipline, real discipline, not just throwing my weight around. Mr. Chen's dojo has a good reputation. My parents would support it. They're desperate for me to find something positive after everything that's happened." "I'd have to talk to my father, and Kevin and Marcus would have to agree. You terrorized them for years." "I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want a chance to be better." Maya considered this. Her mother would have said everyone deserved a second chance, that redemption was always possible. Her father would say that true strength meant having the power to destroy someone and choosing not to. "I'll ask," she said finally. "But if you're playing some angle—" "I'm not," Brad interrupted. "I swear, I've seen where Daniel's path leads, and I don't want any part of it anymore." That evening at the dojo, Maya brought up Brad's request. The reaction was predictable. "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "He's made my life hell for 2 years. Kevin was more thoughtful. "People can change. I did. I was heading down a bad path with boxing, getting into street fights, hanging with the wrong crowd. This place helped me find discipline." "That's different," Marcus protested. "You were never a bully." "No, but I hurt people. Different reasons, same result." David listened to the debate, then spoke. "The purpose of martial arts is not just self-defense, but self-improvement. If this young man genuinely wants to change, shouldn't we give him that opportunity?" "But can we trust him?" Maya asked. "Trust is earned," David replied. "He would start with solo training, basic conditioning and forms. No partner work until he's proven himself. And the first sign of his old behavior, he's out." After much discussion, they agreed to a trial period. Brad would train separately at first, with David personally supervising him. If after a month he'd shown genuine commitment and change, they'd reconsider integrating him into group training. The next few weeks fell into a strange new rhythm. Without Daniel's influence and Tony's threats, Lincoln High became almost normal. The rigid social hierarchies began to break down. Students who'd never dared speak to each other started forming unlikely friendships. Maya found herself actually participating in class discussions, no longer feeling the need to be invisible. Marcus joined the robotics club without fear of being targeted for being a nerd. Kevin used his popularity to bridge different social groups, organizing study sessions that brought together athletes and academic kids. At the dojo, Brad proved surprisingly dedicated. He arrived early, stayed late, and never complained about the grueling conditioning work David put him through. He kept his distance from the others, respecting their space, but occasionally Maya caught him watching their group training with something that looked like longing. "He's trying," Kevin observed one evening as Brad practiced forms alone in the corner. "Trying doesn't erase the past," Marcus replied, though with less venom than before. "No," Maya agreed, "but maybe it can shape the future." It was Sarah who provided the next surprise. She showed up at the dojo one evening, dressed in workout clothes rather than her usual designer outfits. "I want to learn too," she announced. Kevin stared at her. "You want to learn martial arts? Is that so strange? I've spent years using manipulation and social politics to protect myself. Maybe it's time I learned a more direct approach." David welcomed her, as he welcomed all students, and soon Sarah was struggling through the same basic conditioning that had nearly killed Marcus in his first week. To her credit, she didn't complain, though Maya could see her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms during particularly difficult exercises. After training, as they sat on the mats catching their breath, Sarah said something that surprised them all. "I'm sorry for not doing more sooner. I knew Daniel was getting dangerous, knew Brad and his crew were hurting people, but I stayed silent because it was easier, safer." "You warned us when it mattered," Kevin pointed out, "only because it had gotten so extreme I couldn't ignore it anymore." Sarah looked at Maya. "You did what I should have done years ago, stood up to them." "And I did what I had to do to survive," Maya replied. "No," Marcus disagreed. "You did more than that. You protected me when you didn't have to. You created this—" He gestured around the dojo at their unlikely group. "This place where people can change and grow." Maya felt uncomfortable with the praise. She'd spent so long building walls, convinced that caring about others only led to pain. But these people, these friends, she admitted to herself, had somehow slipped past her defenses. A month into Brad's trial period, David called a group meeting. Brad stood nervously before them, having lost some of his bulk but gained definition through the intense training. "Brad has something he wants to say," David announced. Brad cleared his throat, visibly struggling with his words. "I know apologies don't mean much after everything I've done. I terrorized people, hurt them physically and emotionally, and enjoyed the power it gave me. There's no excuse for that." He looked at Marcus directly. "Especially you, Marcus. You were an easy target, and I took advantage of that. I'm sorry." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I don't forgive you," he said finally. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm willing to coexist, to train in the same space, as long as you understand that we're not friends." "I understand," Brad said. "I'm not looking for friendship. I'm looking for redemption, and I know that's a long road." Kevin stood up. "I'm willing to give you a chance. People can change. I'm proof of that." Sarah nodded her agreement. "The Brad I knew before would never have apologized for anything. That's progress." All eyes turned to Maya. She thought about her mother, about second chances and redemption. She thought about her father's wisdom about choosing not to destroy when you had the power to do so. "One chance," she said. "You train with us, but you earn your place. The first sign of your old behavior, you're gone." Brad nodded eagerly. "I won't let you down." As the weeks turned into months, their strange little group solidified into something resembling a family. They still faced challenges. Other students who resented the change in power dynamics, teachers who didn't understand the new social arrangements, parents who worried about their children's unlikely friendships, but they faced these challenges together. One evening, as spring began to warm the city, they sat in the dojo after a particularly intense training session. Marcus had finally mastered a complex throw that he'd been working on for weeks. Sarah had broken her first board, screaming with delight and terror in equal measure. Brad had helped Kevin perfect a defensive technique, the former bully now teaching rather than tormenting. "You know what this is?" Marcus said suddenly, looking around at all of them. "What?" Maya asked. It's what you said you didn't want, Maya. It's friendship. Real friendship. Maya wanted to protest, to maintain her walls, but looking around at these people who'd somehow become essential to her life, she couldn't deny it. Yeah, she said softly. I guess it is. David watched from the doorway, a small smile on his face. His daughter had found what he'd always hoped she would. Not just the ability to defend herself, but people worth defending, and people who would defend her in return. As they prepared to leave, Kevin mentioned an upcoming tournament. It's team-based, he explained. 3-person squads competing in various events, forms, sparring, self-defense demonstrations. I think we should enter. We're not ready for competition, Marcus protested. We're more ready than you think, Brad disagreed. And it would be a chance to show what Phoenix martial arts is really about. Not just fighting, but discipline, respect, and transformation. Maya looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. What do you think, Maya? He asked. Ready to show the world what you've all built here? Maya looked around at her unlikely team. The former victim, the reformed fighter, the redeemed bully, the evolved socialite. 6 months ago, she would have said they had nothing in common. Now, she couldn't imagine facing the world without them. Let's do it, she said. As they walked out into the warm spring evening, Sarah fell into step beside Maya. You know, when you first came to Lincoln High, I thought you were going to destroy everything. Maybe I did, Maya replied. No, Sarah said thoughtfully. You revealed what was already broken and gave us a chance to build something better. Ahead of them, Marcus and Kevin were arguing good-naturedly about tournament strategies, while Brad listened with genuine interest. 6 months ago, it would have been unthinkable. Now, it felt natural, right even. Maya thought about her mother, about the community she'd always talked about building, about finding strength not in isolation, but in connection. She'd spent so long running from her grief, channeling it into anger, using it as armor against the world. But maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found something worth opening up for. The tournament was still 3 months away, giving them time to prepare. But Maya wasn't worried about the competition. Win or lose, they'd already achieved something remarkable. They'd taken a group of broken, angry, isolated individuals and forged them into something stronger. They'd become a family, and families, Maya was learning, protected each other not through violence or intimidation, but through trust, respect, and the courage to change. As she walked home with her father that evening, David put his arm around her shoulders. Your mother would be proud, he said simply. For the first time in 4 years, Maya could accept that without the familiar surge of grief and anger. Yeah, she said, leaning into his embrace, I think she would be. The path of the fighter, she'd learned, wasn't just about the battles you fought. It was about the people you chose to fight for, the community you built, and the strength you found not in standing alone, but in standing together. And for Maya Chen, who'd arrived at Lincoln High as a weapon waiting to explode, that was the greatest victory of all.